Hello. So today I'm going to talk about the last chapters in Politics UK, chapters 28, 29, and 30. I'm going to divide this into two parts since there's a lot to unpack here, but these chapters go into British foreign and defense policy, Britain and European Union, and then UK immigration policy and the hostile environment. So from reading the book, in studying what Brexit meant for the Britons who voted to leave the growing supranational powers of the European Union at the time, we can infer that Brexit was this closely linked phenomenon that dates back to England and its English exceptionalism and English liberty. That has been a recurring theme in the UK's policies we have seen. Now, these concepts of English exceptionalism and liberty were explored in other videos that I produced, but that history of national pride and perceiving one's country as unique to others has been a prominent position in the United Kingdom's policies via England's notable power over the entire kingdom. Now, some historical examples of this concept best expressed include the perception of the Glorious Revolution's comparatively smooth transition away from absolutism compared to the rest of Europe at the time, and the United Kingdom's position of power in saving Europe from itself on multiple occasions. Now, England, as we know, is only one country in the United Kingdom of England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, but England has historically, and can be argued still remains, the hegemonic source of power for the entire United Kingdom. Regardless of the devolutionary efforts and even Brexit support from conservatives even outside of England, England, and Westminster more specifically, has been at the helm of the exercising of autonomy and authority in the United Kingdom, beginning from the union with Wales nearly a millennium ago, well into the British Empire, and still today, as the Brexit vote proved itself a project made by the English for English goals. I have read throughout this book that the interchangeability between the terms the United Kingdom and England positions England as the cardinal source of decision-making, even when there are so-called devolved powers granted to places like Scotland and Wales, when in fact they still remain at Westminster's will, essentially, and they could easily be dissolved if Westminster chooses to. Now, Brexit is another stage in the powerhouse of English policy and power over its leading position in government in the United Kingdom. Because the English, as well as the Welsh for the Brexit example, those concerns for maintaining parliamentary sovereignty, and thus English sovereignty, won out over the concerns of Britons who remained loyal to the EU integrative efforts, or at the very least, maintaining the status quo of EU governance. Now, of course, this argument isn't to say that all English are nationalist, but is instead to recognize that the English concerns have and continue to dominate the political discourse and direction of governments for the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom and the United States have had a uniquely closer relationship than those two countries share with other countries, and this is best highlighted in the media's portrayal of the two nations as essentially a sibling camaraderie across the Atlantic, where the concept of the other ever being portrayed as an enemy to the other is almost satirical, given how close our relationship has been known, especially in the post-World War II era. However, the author points out that this relationship is not one that neither side should take for granted, given the two's changing locus of concern towards the Indo-Pacific region. And the changing demographics of each country shows that the Anglo-Saxon identity that has defined the traditional Western Bloc shows signs of a potential shift. And the author pointed out especially how, given the United States' historical identity as similarly white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, or WASP, to the United Kingdom, which also has this similar identity, in the recent years of shifting identities, especially as a result of mass migration to the two countries, the historical special relationship of the United States with the United Kingdom might not remain as intact as before or even as it is now in the near future. As the demographics and the concentrations of power away from the WASP-dominated northeastern American seaboard is being more dispersed amongst Black Americans, many Latinos of immigrant backgrounds, and Asian diasporas spreading from China to India, how they're also influencing American policy. That at the very least, the United States, in this example, might not perceive its relationship with the United Kingdom in the same high regard that we have come to associate it with in the past 80 years especially. Additionally, the United Kingdom is experiencing a similar yet more proportionate scale of immigration and demographic shifts in the influence of Asian and Black Britons, for example, that in some ways, the concerns of the United Kingdom and the United States might coexist in something like the Indo-Pacific, yet the distinct aspects of Latino migration in the United States and Eastern Europeans in the United Kingdom has the potential to further shift the agendas of these two away from the conventional standards of the US-UK relations we have come to take for granted. What really struck me about this point was the fact that these relationships that we perceive in the United States, I speak especially as an American perspective here, with the UK being seen as our strongest and closest ally alongside other relationships that we kind of conceive in the United States. For example, Canada is almost like our younger brother who looks up to us in some ways, and Mexico is a distant relative that we only really get involved with when necessary. Now we see that these types of relationships are not entirely static neither, especially given Trump's condescending comments earlier this year about annexing Canada that drove the Canadian Liberal Party to victory in the following elections, and just how much more Latino the United States is becoming, and we'll see its influence play out, especially as those of my generation who come from the massive Latino migration patterns make our impact in US culture and US foreign policy. The United Kingdom is another one of these relationships we will continue to see shift over time, as the UK does not perceive China with the same level of antagonism as the United States has adopted recently. And as Europe continues to be threatened by Russia, the influence of Eastern Europeans in the United Kingdom could reorient the United Kingdom to maybe not an entire, but a somewhat U-turn towards focusing back on European political contexts and European foreign policy more specifically, even after leaving the EU. We can almost see that this unraveling from a WASP-centric centralization of power between the US and UK relations to a more dispersed model appears as a positive motion for the sake of inclusivity and representation, especially as other nations grow in their global influence. Yet it is worth considering what else might be abandoned in regards to the special relationship with the US and the UK, as this consensus between Washington and London that we have turned to for security for quite a while becomes more contested, and what else we will see become unraveled alongside that. The United Kingdom is also experiencing an interesting further globalization integration, as so much of its industries are foreign owned, or at least have foreign investments that make the UK further at the whim of globalization and its dynamic tendencies. And this reminds me of the position of the US's pace in further globalizing under Obama by the mid-teens, until Trump's disruptive pause of this process once he became president. While both the US and the UK around 2016 experienced a shakeup in policy towards foreign powers, with Trump's early protectionist stance for the US, and the success of the Brexit campaign, of course. The UK has, by comparison to the United States, especially since this time that I just discussed, has acted comparably less dramatic in reining in the globalization process as compared to the United States. In this regard, the United Kingdom remains comparatively dependent on globalization that, as it manages to navigate its neo-global Britain position in the post-Brexit era, protectionist policies in the United Kingdom will have to be managed more cautiously there than in the United States, given the two powers' distinct levels of self-sufficiency. Now, with the US, for example, having a comparative abundance of resources and a stronger internal market and investments than compared to the United Kingdom. keep in mind that the United Kingdom's adoption of the neoliberal policies by the 80s, the policies that eventually fueled globalization, were done when the United Kingdom was in a much worse economic position than the United States around that time. So given this context, I wouldn't see that if the UK were to hypothetically drop out of the globalizing economy through harsher protectionist policies, that it would somehow inevitably return to its helpless status as before, but instead that the United Kingdom just has more at stake when it comes to globalization and the pace and degree of protectionism that it can adopt compared to the United States. From the looks of it now, the UK does not see the same efforts of bringing jobs back to the United Kingdom as the United States has been trying since Trump's first term, into Biden's, and again into Trump's second term. So instead, either the United Kingdom might best benefit by continuing to have a globally integrated economy, and thus would have to tread lightly with the relations with countries like China, or maybe the time for a further disruption into British economic and foreign policy has yet to come, that it would somehow adopt a similar approach for a UK scale of the disruptionist, protectionist policies that Trump has placed for the United Kingdom. Now, of course, this is all speculation, but this analysis aims to evaluate into further detail the globalization wider context that the author highlights regarding the United Kingdom in this critical time in world history, as well as just how we should not presume that the United Kingdom will continue acting in near alignment with American policies when something like protectionism might have deeper costs for the United Kingdom than the United States, as these countries and many countries continue more protectionist policies. For example, France in its strategic autonomy approach. The United Kingdom will not entirely be in regard with the conventional consensus between London and Washington that we have seen for the past 80 years, because these two countries now are diverging at different points as we continue to see a protectionist development happen. I will drop part 2 real soon, but I will see you guys till then.